I'm a member of a Zen Sangha in the Plum Village tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, who I think is an amazing person and very wise, just like Jesus and Muhammad are wise people who have a lot of great lessons. Whether it's religion or business, I personally think that every human contains all information, and everything that we experience in life or everything that we might learn from other people. For example, if you're listening to this podcast or have listened to past episodes and something my guests have shared has been interesting to you, if it's inspired you, if it's helped you to change your behavior, I truly believe that's because you already contain the answer and you're just able to access it because of something that's happening cognitively when you hear these things from other people, or when you meditate, or you listen to or read something in a Dharma talk, or from a teacher, or from your pastor or a priest. And I know that this might be controversial to some people. This is just my personal view. But I think what all of these experiences do, when you step into the crucible and you're on the forge and getting struck by the by the hammer as a piece of molten metal, I think if you become more attuned to how you think, feel, and act when that's happening, maybe that's the net. Maybe that's the thing that you're getting from the experience. And as I went through the process of building the Better Lab and navigating financial insecurity and trying to find product market fit and trying to get to funding, and most importantly, trying to build a product to truly help people suffer less and get better sleep, did I have a lot of moments of doubt and insecurity and at times not knowing what exactly to do, or feeling some lapses in confidence or uncertainty about how to navigate it? Yes, absolutely. And it was a transformative experience. And I really found that I had the capacity to do this all along. So that's the answer that I got. That is really the most important thing I take away from this. I'm the net. Once we started doing it, I felt like, I love this. I love doing this. That experience transformed my view of my ability to do that. This is Andrew, and this episode is a little different. So even if you normally skip over these introductions, please give this one a listen. My mission in life is to help people suffer less, to be more present, and to build a healthy relationship with themselves and other people. To do more of all of that at a greater scale, faster, I'm trying new things. This podcast and my Substack will be the sandbox where I test, rapid prototype, and explore new ideas as I build them in public that I think you will dig. Roll with me on this journey and DM me at HardwayPod to let me know what you think. Today's episode is about my story. More specifically, the story of my experience as a startup founder. In 2022, I co-founded what became the Better Lab to help people actually do the things that science shows improve sleep, because sleep is the foundation of all human health and performance. And as someone who's used wearables since they were invented, I knew the data and hardware provided information that was sometimes directionally useful, often made me more anxious, and that what really improved my health and performance was adopting science-backed behaviors proven to work and doing them consistently over time. For me, and for a lot of people, changing behavior is actually extremely difficult. That's why the Better Lab worked with world-class sleep scientists, behavioral scientists, and human performance experts to build a simple, fun methodology that was science-backed, that reconnected people to their bodies and minds, and that actually changed their behavior for the better and made it stick. We started with sleep. It worked. And over time, the plan was to apply this methodology in other areas of health, wellness, and performance. We had a sharp team, a strong product, and smart backers, and an early financing that included one of the best venture firms in the Valley and top-tier angels who started and backed companies like Strava and The Athletic. But we didn't get big enough, and it didn't happen fast enough. And now our startup is an End Up. The End Up is a legendary dance venue in San Francisco. It's where you end up on a night out and keep dancing until noon the next day with a big smile on your face. It's a liminal space where people connect and anything can happen. I'm not talking about that End Up. I'm talking about the End Up of the Better Lab. But for me, this is even more exciting than a big night out that never ends. I'm grateful to everyone who supported the Better Lab, and I wanted to share my Better Lab experience and why I'm doubling down and starting 2 new companies. That's right, 2 new companies. One of my new businesses, One Real Voice, is live right now. For senior executives, professional athletes, venture partners, and politicians, podcasts are no longer a novelty or an afterthought. They're a mandatory and mission-critical communication channel. You can't just show up, be a pull string, talking points robot, and expect to do well when the mic goes hot. You have to be a real person who can carry a broad-ranging, long-form conversation with presence and purpose when the stakes are high. I work one-on-one with a limited group of clients to provide strategic guidance and coach them to develop into world-class podcast guests and hosts. When you're ready to be great, DM me or shoot me an email to hello@onerealvoice.com. You can always DM me on Instagram at hardwaypod and find all of my links there as well. I'm also building something new in consumer technology. This product is in stealth mode for right now, but I will be sharing more soon. Stay tuned to this podcast, Choose the Hard Way, and subscribe to my Substack, alwaysthehardway.substack.com, to stay in the loop as things progress. Shut the door, take a seat, and let me tell you about my co-pilot for today's flight into the startup stratosphere, the one, the only, the legendary Shannon Jones. I met Shannon when we were both recruited to the human performance startup TRX during its hyper growth phase. Since then, Shannon has been a close friend and a trusted advisor. He was an invaluable mentor through every phase of the Better Lab, from ideation to fundraising to the wind down, and he continues to be a trusted sounding board and another piece of iron that sharpens the blade as I build what's next. Shannon is an investor, educator, and executive advisor with deep roots in both private equity and entrepreneurship. He's the founder of Halstatt Legacy Partners, a family office-backed investment firm focused on acquiring and scaling formerly family-owned businesses. And he has leadership roles that he's held in a range of early-stage ventures spanning fitness, media, education, and health. Shannon's advisory work centers on newly minted CEOs, leaders navigating the leap into institutional expectations, post-acquisition leadership, or high-growth startup transitions. While many arrive seeking tactical guidance, his work often evolves into deeper explorations of self-awareness, identity, and behavioral development. You can see why he's great for this conversation. Shannon's also an adjunct professor at the University of Colorado Leeds School of Business, where he teaches courses on acquisition, entrepreneurship, and the leadership of scaling businesses. His approach blends candor and humor, as you'll find out, with real-world grit, which he has in spades, shaped by experiences ranging from co-founding a boxing-focused reality TV startup to recruiting CEOs for investor-backed platforms. Find Shannon on LinkedIn at W. Shannon Jones and subscribe to his brand spanking new Substack, transcendentceo.substack.com. That's transcendentceo.substack.com. Links are in the show notes. As for you, you're listening to this. That tells me something. You think expansively, you take action. You've got a big idea you might be sitting on, waiting for the stars to align. The truth is, nothing is guaranteed in life. Everything changes, the good, the bad, all of it. As you'll hear in this episode, Aaron Burby, who was one of my dearest and closest friends and mentors, completed 18 Ironmans and won his age group in many of them in sport, in business, in life. Aaron was a fucking champion, and he always went full gas. Then one day, he had a stroke from a genetic condition called Moyamoya disease that he didn't know that he ever had. Aaron fell into a coma, and within days, he was dead at age 46. I was on the other side of the country in Maine while Aaron was in a hospital room in a coma in San Francisco. This was during COVID. We didn't get to say goodbye, and then he was gone. So You might think you have forever. You think that your friends will always be here, or your family. You don't have forever, and everyone dies, and you don't know when your day is coming. So, whatever your big idea is, go for it. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Whatever happens, you'll find something inside yourself that you didn't know, and you'll meet someone you haven't met before, and that person is who you are. Don't die wondering. From startup to end up to one real voice, this is the beginning. Let's go. Getting started with crypto has never been so easy. Blockchain.com is your trusted platform for buying, selling, and holding crypto, no matter your experience level. When you crypto with blockchain.com. Palm Tree Podcast specializes in helping brands, businesses, and creators produce their best podcast work. Palm Tree Podcast provides strategic guidance, editing, production, and social support for some of the best audio in the Podiverse, and you can work with them too by going to palmtreepodco.com. All right, we've had the countdown. That's the Blue Origin launch. I'm now here with Katy Perry. We're in outer space, and I'm also joined today by Shannon Jones. This may or may not be the beginning of the episode. We're here today to talk about something I've been working on in earnest really for the past 3 years that no longer is something that I'm working on, and that is the Better Lab. And I've had a few episodes where I am the focus of the episode, or something I have done is the focus of the episode. I've talked about bike racing. I've talked about a TV pilot I made with my good friend, Eric Matthews, the producer, director, writer, documentarian, that did not get picked up. And today we're talking about the Better Lab, because if I have this podcast that's about, broadly it's about Zen in life, and it's also about how doing hard things builds stronger people who have more fun. Well, if I wasn't talking about some of the hard things that I've done and the fun I've had along the way, Shannon, who would I be?
Hypocrisy, the height of hypocrisy, if you weren't willing to talk about those things.
Yeah, and I know Shannon from my time at the human performance company, TRX, where I met a lot of incredibly talented individuals with highly diverse backgrounds, and Shannon is one of them. We both grew up in the Midwest, and I think an interesting fact about Shannon, who was a 2X D1 athlete, former investment banker, Northwestern MBA, and one of those sports that you played, Shannon, was football. And I remember I very briefly went to some jiu-jitsu classes with my brother and another colleague of ours there at TRX. I learned a few basic moves. I had written about the UFC a lot as a journalist. I had some curiosity. I was fairly strong at the time. One of your D1 sports was football. I remember the day after one of the jiu-jitsu classes, we were talking about what we had learned, and you said, "Oh, why don't you show me that armbar or whatever the thing was?" And then you laid down on the ground. I tried to put this armbar or choke on you, and then before I could blink my eyes, you had violently jumped on top of me and choked me out. And that was one of the interesting things about that workplace at TRX at the height of its fame and glory. A lot of interesting things like that going on in the aisles and other parts of the building. And that's where part of when I learned that some people are built a bit differently, and I'm an endurance athlete.
Yeah. Not a lot of people know about the latent violence that's sort of simmering just beneath the surface. But when you are arguably the least successful two-sport athlete in the history of Northwestern, you develop a fairly intense Napoleonic complex. Particularly, I was a kicker. Those of you who are viewing this, because you can only see me kind of diaphragm up, can't tell how small I am. But my average teammates were 2 times bigger than me, and so I had to develop a method to defend myself, which was usually unsuccessful. But against you, it was in that particular instance. It's funny. I was talking to somebody the other day about I have a very visceral memory of meeting you for the first time. We were in line for some like lunch buffet for new employees, and you were standing behind me, and you basically asked me who I was and like what the hell I was doing there. Or at least that was my impression of it. And then you asked me like a series of extremely incisive questions. And then I later realized that you had a writing and reporting background. But it was interesting because in the time that I think we were having like some sort of Mexican food. And in the time we went from like 10 people away from the Mexican food to the Mexican food, I had basically told you my deepest, darkest secrets and like everything, everything about myself, including my issues about having strived for greatness in college and not achieved it and all these other things. So I'm excited to turn the tables on you here a little bit and to really dig into you in the way that you dug into me back in like 2010 or whenever that was.
I am so curious, Shannon, how many other colleagues at work have you violently choked out?
You're the only one that I've ever actually had in that position. There have been earlier in my life, in my 20s, possibly alcohol-induced episodes, usually where my interpretation of what's going on is I'm like invoking or enforcing justice on someone who's demonstrating severe entitlement of some sort, but none involving an actual like asphyxiation kind of situation. Some, pushing the occasional, kidney punch, but that's in the past. It was a long time ago.
Okay, so Shannon Jones is not a Mortal Kombat character. He doesn't have a signature finishing move on his colleagues. He's not ripping out their spines or anything of that nature. I also wanted to mention, so one of the reasons I wanted to have Shannon on here, one of my best friends, he's been a mentor throughout my career since I've known him, really great human being, also has a deep interest in Zen and Buddhism as I do. And you also have been an operator, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been in finance, obviously, as an iBanker, you've been in private equity, and you also have been in the business of acquiring businesses and as an investment instrument for family offices and in private equity situations, and then helping people to become CEOs of these companies and then operate the companies themselves. And so you've kind of really worked on every side of the ecosystem of entrepreneurship and capital markets. And in addition to that, you are a teacher at UC Boulder, a professor teaching entrepreneurship. And you have been with me every step of the Better Lab journey throughout my career. And with this in particular, I've always valued your counsel. You've been privy to every success, every failure, every decision made along the way. And I've really valued and benefited from getting to talk to you throughout the trajectory of this business. And now that we have wound the business down, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about where we're at and where we are going forward and what I've learned along the way. And I thought there's not a better person to do this with than Shannon. So thanks for being here.
Well, I'm happy to be here is the understatement of the day. And if I had to distill into simple terms what all the things that I spend my time thinking about or doing have in common, it's really helping people achieve increasing levels of self-awareness, and particularly people who find themselves in the crucibles of entrepreneurship in different forms. And so you're right, I've seen it, either experienced it myself as like the 0 to 1, self-financed, the 0 to 1, and then kind of venture financed. Earlier in my career, a bigger kind of almost public company. And then now in various forms, either helping or being the capital behind entrepreneurs buying companies and becoming the leaders of those companies. And the thing that I see in common that rarely gets talked about, but is consistent, is that this mantle of leadership in unknown circumstances is extremely hard and on theme for choosing the hard way. I mean, when you choose one form of entrepreneurship or another, whether you know it or not, you are opting into an existential challenge, an emotional challenge, a spiritual challenge, a familial, it stresses every aspect of your life. And I find that most entrepreneurs, when they're willing to really acknowledge it, they all experience it. The question is whether or not they're willing to acknowledge it. And so one of the things that I've found most gratifying, I think it's why we're friends, is as you've experienced the ups and downs and the difficulties and occasional successes of entrepreneurship, you've been interested in exploring what those experiences are doing to you, what they feel like, how they're changing you, how they're when you come through them on the other end, how they're informing your view of yourself and how you exist in the world and what your role is. And I find that really valuable work. And so, you're welcome. But I also find that when I talk to somebody about their own experience, I learn about my own, or I'm reminded about things that I thought I knew that I forgot, or experiences that I've had that I didn't really understand, and then they have new meaning for me when I sort of experience them with someone else through their lens. So I'm excited to have this conversation because I think it's one that's not had enough among entrepreneurs. And I think it's, I think it's awesome that you're willing to have it because I think a lot of people wouldn't be.
Shannon, another thing I should mention about you is you also, while getting your MBA at Northwestern, and please correct me if I'm getting this wrong, I think I'm getting it right. You were producing a movie in Los Angeles with a major Hollywood star, and then you also were beginning your acting career at that time. Is that correct?
The chronology is a little bit
off there.
So you're correct that I was a producer on a film called Play the Game, which was
what we're doing right now.
Yes, we are definitely, and on some level, always playing the game. A romantic comedy starring Andy Griffith, and I'm not kidding. So you can stream it, independently financed. And when I got to Kellogg, which is the business school, the graduate business school at Northwestern, I had been acting in New York. So you can also Google, I think then my official street actor name was W. Shannon Jones. You can Google that and you'll find a not terribly complimentary review of a play, and me in particular, that's in the New York Times. That play was called The Suckerfish Messiah. And I think maybe the most redeeming aspect of my performance was that I was on stage in only my underwear at one point. And as a younger version of me, I was pretty shredded at that moment. So I came to Kellogg because I'd realized that I while the performance aspect of acting was gratifying to me, and it actually, in some ways, acting is not therapy, but for me, and kind of given some of my unwillingness to really dive into emotion, it became a gateway for me to really experience it. But so after that experience of doing improv and theatrical acting, and having like a couple extra parts on sitcoms where I was literally like standing in the background doing nothing. I went to business school because I didn't think I would ever be able to support a family doing that. And I thought that there was maybe there were other things that I could do creatively that, would be of benefit. So when I got to school, I was definitely weird because I didn't do a single on-campus interview. And I basically talked my way into this movie production, and then spent like the greater part of my second year at Kellogg commuting back and forth to LA when we were shooting the film. And then after near the end of my second year, and then immediately after graduating from Kellogg, I worked on a television project. And after a couple, collectively like 4 years of film, TV, and entertainment, I realized that there were other aspects of entrepreneurship that might be better for me. Yeah. We could have a whole podcast on the weird and seemingly nonlinear career that I've experienced over the last like 25 years.
Yeah, the linearity that I see in your career, and as I was reflecting on having this conversation that we're actually having right now, we're excited about it, we're thankful, and we're actually having the conversation.
Yes.
And I think the characteristics that I see in that trajectory, and I've been thinking about this in relation to the Better Lab, in relation to One Real Voice, the new business that I have now started, which is a strategic podcast consultancy that coaches senior leaders, pro athletes, and politicians to be great guests or hosts, because being great at those things is now mission critical for senior leaders, professional athletes, and politicians. And if you're not great at it, you're getting left behind. And long form conversations are very different than what I used to train executives to do when they sat down with the New York Times or Bloomberg or so forth. Anyhow, I think what I see in that trajectory is someone who, when they hear the call to adventure, when their intuition or gut or their human spirit draws them towards a big challenge that is not a conventional linear career path, you are someone who says yes. And instead of saying why, you say why not. And when I think about entrepreneurship, I think that this is a fundamental characteristic. It is not a characteristic that every human embraces. I do think that it is a characteristic that every human has. And I think saying why not, I think that answering and heeding the call to adventure is among the most uncomfortable things that a human being can do, because it means continually, I know that it's very culturally popular to talk about the comfort crisis, embracing discomfort, and so forth. Humans have always done this, at least ones who have sought to move culture and humanity forward and to do things that are great and big things. It's just a necessary part of the process. And there is a lot of risk involved. And that's just something that's really been on my mind, is just how the primacy of heeding that call to adventure. And I think for me, something that happened in my life in 2020, I've talked about a bit on this podcast and on other podcasts that I have been a guest on. One of my very close friends, who you may have met at my wedding, my friend Aaron Burby, is one of my best friends in the Bay Area. He was also an endurance athlete, competed in 18 Ironman triathlons, won several of them in his age group, highly accomplished business person, had a stroke and died in August of 2020. I last saw Aaron. I remember the last time I saw Aaron, which would have been probably, right around this time. It would have been somewhere between May 7th and 15th, 2020. He had his rescue dog with him, and I saw him in Golden Gate Park. And I remember my wife, Molly, and I and our kids had gone to Ocean Beach that day. Aaron was a high achieving person and was often very late to things. And he was running like an hour and a half late. We almost left the city because we were living in Oakland at the time. And I'm glad we waited, because that actually was the last time I ever saw Aaron when he was alive, was that day. And we chatted for a few minutes. It was during COVID. And then I actually received news of his death from a colleague on the executive team at Strava that was also from Washington State and was just acquaintances with him, who had heard from friends of friends that Aaron had had a stroke and was in a hospital, and he was in a coma, and then he died later that week. And Aaron also was someone who always heeded the call to adventure. And whatever I was doing in my personal, professional, or sporting life, he was someone who always said, why not? Like, why would you not do thing X? Why would you not start a business? why would you not try to go win Unbound, 100, whatever the case may be? And that's just been on my mind, just the primacy of stepping into the unknown. And a lot of people say leap and the net will appear. I'm here to tell you the net often does not appear. And
I got a couple stories about the proverbial like Looney Tunes free fall off the cliff.
Yeah, exactly. So this has turned into a bit of a soliloquy. That's been on my mind, though.
Well, the interesting thing, I mean, as it relates to me, but this, I'd like to steer this conversation back toward being more about you. So soliloquies from you are more appropriate than soliloquies from me. So yes, I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying about me. If you were to think about my life in different stages, the reason behind the saying yes or the answering the call would have been different. It's certainly different now that I'm 49 than it was when I was, 18 and deciding, do I want to go into this environment where yes, they know I'm coming, but I don't have a scholarship. And, there's this other guy who's going to go to the NFL who's in front of me. And then there's this other guy who's got a scholarship who's in front of me. And, so my reason for making that decision then is not the same reason that I make a decision now to say yes. But the other thing that I think about, and it might be an interesting way to kind of segue back to you, is two things come to mind. One is, you can see the things to which I have said yes, but you don't often see the things to which I have not. So while it appears in some respects that I have taken risks or said yes to things that others wouldn't have, you don't get to see the other things where self-judgment, self-doubt, influences from, people who are meaningful in my life or whatever inspire me not to say yes, right? So it's true that I do, but it's also true that I don't. The other thing that I think about is that often in life, and I would love to hear your reaction to this, is saying yes comes with a cost. It comes with consequences for you personally, for those around you. So there is this primacy to saying yes, but it's not the yes is not free. And I'm curious, when I say that to you, what comes to mind? What do you think about, or how do you relate to that?
Yeah, I'm going to go at this head on, and I'm going to talk about something I almost never hear entrepreneurs talk about. And that's the financial consequences of having your company wipe out. And I want to talk also about saying no. So I'm going to talk about saying no, and I'm going to talk about the consequences of saying yes. When I was on the executive team at Strava during the highest growth period in its history and helped turn around the company from a RIF, a leadership transition, a reputational deficit with our paid subscribers, and helped the company within a year of all of that happening become highly profitable and helped it to grow faster than it ever had in the history of the company, and do a massive financing that resulted in it being valued at north of $1.5 billion. I had so much opportunity coming my way. And I actually, this past week, as I'm now making this transition and starting another business, and I didn't even talk about, I'm also building a consumer technology company in the mindfulness space that I'm bootstrapping on the side. There'll be more about that in the next month or two. And during that time at Strava, I had recruiters constantly kicking in the door, trying to drag me away from Strava for obscene amounts of money and equity at highly valuable companies, as is often the case for executives that have done well and have demonstrated their ability to execute and create outsized results. And, subsequently in the years since then, I've seen many of those companies, even in this constrained IPO market today, many of those companies went public. Many of those companies had massive financial success, and Strava itself, of course, continues to grow. And in early 2022, I made the decision that it was time for me to listen to the call to adventure. And I felt I was making great use of my talents, and I was very significantly contributing in my role. And I also had this feeling that, Shannon, I was, if it were a rock band, if this were Guns N' Roses, I was more of an Axl Rose and less of a Duff McKagan. And they're both great. I spent some time with Duff McKagan as a journalist. Incredibly intelligent, has an MBA, actually, got an MBA to manage his own money. And yeah, he's a super bright guy. He went to a Jesuit university in Seattle. So this is not to disparage Duff McKagan. I just felt like I wasn't the bass player. I wasn't a backup singer. I felt like I had a lot of big ideas that I wanted to express on a bigger canvas. And that's why I made the decision to take that leap. I didn't necessarily know what exactly I was going to do. And that evolved.
So if I can stop, is that why? Yeah. So you had all this inbound people offering, probably like Duff McKagan did backstage after a concert, a lot of inbound, a lot of opportunity, a lot of temptation, different forms of, temptation, but none, money and equity and whatever. And I'm sure prestige, either association to named venture funds or association with known entrepreneurs or whatever. And you said no to that because you had this feeling that to say yes would be saying yes to a similar kind of secondary, tertiary position rather than what you wanted to say yes to, which was being more in front and being the sort of advocate for the idea, the progenitor of the idea. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's part of what I'm saying. And in fact, when I made the transition from journalism to go work for TRX, when I met Randy, the former Team 6 Navy SEAL who started TRX, who recruited both of us directly and got us to move to San Francisco and work for the company, a feeling that I had at the time, I love journalism and I love podcasting. I love helping other people share their stories. I personally deeply benefit from those stories and from the experiences I've gotten to have as a storyteller. And as a journalist, a feeling that I often had was I was not making a first order thing. I was making a derivative. And I wanted to make a first order thing that directly animated and impacted people's lives. And that's not to diminish the role of storytelling. Nobody believes in it more than me. I just often had the feeling of, why am I the person here telling the story of this person and not being the person doing the thing? And I wanted to explore what that might feel like. And for me, a step towards doing that was going and working for businesses. And I think part of what I discovered over time, particularly towards, mid to late 2021, 2022, my gut experience, and I'm someone who over time, I more and more deeply believe, and now I'm 100% certain in the power of literally our gut and the connection between our gut and our brain and intuition. And I know not everyone has a high degree of belief in that. I think there's a book out there about why you shouldn't listen to your gut. I completely disagree with that. What I was experiencing somatically, and probably the last 18 months during my time at Strava, I started to feel dissociated as a human being. I felt like when I was going back into my home, I was, which was walking through this door, basically. I no longer felt present. I didn't feel like I was a present father or partner to my wife. And I felt like part of that was a misalignment between the environment I was in, what I was doing professionally, and how I actually needed to spend my time. And then I also think with Aaron's death and just listening to my intuition, I had this sense of, if I don't give this a shot now, when am I going to give it a shot?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be when I'm 60? Is that when I'll feel sufficiently financially secure and confident enough to make the leap and give this a shot? And I also started working with a high performance coach, my good friend, Dara Harris, who at the time was a high performance expert at the Toronto Blue Jays. She trained as a psychiatrist and then worked with medical professionals in the high performance domain at WashU. And then she went into pro sports. I had the opportunity and privilege of getting to work with her, and she helped me become more attuned to interoception, my sense of what was happening inside of my body. And that also was around the time I've long been interested in meditation. I took a transcendental meditation training in the early 2000s in LA and had practiced it intermittently. It was around 2021, 2022 that I finally picked up, I think, one of the 3 Thich Nhat Hanh books my mom had sent me over the years. And I started to become interested in Zen and Buddhism. And the deeper I got into that with inputs from mentors and friends like you, experts like Dara, I was like, this is the right thing to do. And I need to take this risk. And it doesn't matter how much financial opportunity or upside and security I have. What is security if you're dissociated and lack conscious awareness? And not because, and can people cultivate that and find that in the circumstances I just described? Absolutely. A Buddhist monk has 3 robes and a bowl, right? So you can, that's like one of Thich Nhat Hanh's big things. You are here. Happiness is available in every moment. And I also think you need to continually examine, is there an alignment between what you're doing for a living, how you're spending your time every day, and what your vision or mission is for your life? For me, my vision is to help people suffer less and find greater conscious awareness and presence. I see that as the unifying force in everything that I do. And I felt like it was time to take the risk. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I didn't know who I was going to do it with. That became the Better Lab. Also, at the beginning of this question, you asked me, what are the consequences of saying yes? So now I'm on the other side of this. Throughout that whole experience, I had 100% total confidence that the Better Lab was going to work as a product. It was, and I believe, we have now turned off the app. I believe it was a fantastic product. We had a lot of signal from people who used it that it was transformative. It helped them to actually do the science-backed behaviors proven to improve their sleep by self-rating and not being over-reliant on wearables. It helped them to develop interoception, conscious awareness, and it really truly improved their lives. And when they slept better, I believe that they suffered less. So I think it was a fantastic product. And we didn't get traction fast enough, and we didn't get to the round of fundraising that we needed to close. We weren't able to close it. What are the actual consequences then of saying yes? One of the consequences of saying yes is I've spent almost all the money I've ever made to make that business happen and support my family throughout that process. And now, that's the position I'm in. And I also truly feel called, and like the thing I am supposed to be doing is being a builder, being an entrepreneur, and that this is the highest and best way I can serve the world and help people suffer less and find greater conscious awareness. And the reality of that right now is financial insecurity. And, I'm an extremely privileged person. I've had a lot of success during the course of my career. And I have a lot of opportunities in front of me. So it's not this or the gutter. And I continue to choose to take risks that might seem outsized and highly irrational to people who are not me. And to me, the only way is to continue to say yes when I hear the call to adventure and to continue to go forward. And so that's one reality of saying yes. Another reality is at the outset of this, I had an idea, I had a hypothesis about being Axl Rose, not being Duff McKagan. I now have what I feel is 100% certainty. This is who I am. I am a builder, and I was born to do this. This is what I am. This is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. And what does that feel like? I mean, there's a possibility of interpreting what you've said as like, okay, I went through this experience, and now on the far end, we didn't raise the money we needed to continue moving forward, and I am awakening to this realization that I've spent every dime. But the reality is, this financial uncertainty has been obvious to you for much of this experience. And I'm curious, what are you experiencing as an entrepreneur who believes absolutely in the efficacy of the thing that you're building and its ability to help people suffer less, while at the same time staring at your financial statements and seeing the number get smaller and smaller? What is that like?
Yeah. I believe my financial insecurity and uncertainty is real. I also believe while the linearity of the path in front of me is actually not linear and I don't know how it works out, I know that I am someone who can solve any problem that is put in front of me. I know that resourcefulness is my greatest resource. And I would be lying to you if I said I was always deeply connected to those notions and to total confidence. And at the same time, at some level, I am. Like, I have absolute certainty that I can succeed at anything that I want to do. I'm not going to go run the world's fastest 100 meters. Not this year, at least. We don't know what's going to happen with Neuralink and going to Mars. But as it relates to my capacity to make things happen as an entrepreneur, I think one of the things that I've realized, and this is something, again, that I talked about with Dara Harris, who's been my high performance coach. She was an advisor to the Better Lab as well. A concept that she introduced me to was the infinity dial. And for anything in life, whether it's your financial security, your health, your wellness, the stability of relationships, it's actually very similar to the Buddhist concept of impermanence. And all suffering arises, or at least this is how it's characterized in Buddhism, all suffering arises from clinging and from aversion. So it's from wanting things to be different than they are. And financial insecurity, if I cling to that idea, then I feel like I'm buying into the idea that I lack agency or I'm not capable of getting traction with my new businesses or finding a way forward. Or in the worst case scenario, pull the ripcord and go do something else to generate revenue. That's not what I'm going to do. And I don't believe that's what's going to happen. But I think that's when suffering arises, or when maybe I start to disconnect from my confidence, is when you start to have target fixation on the negative. And I actually would love to talk about that concept. I had a member of the Air Force's demonstration flight team, the Thunderbirds, on this podcast, Mace Curran. It's an incredible episode. I loved it. Really interesting person, and I recommend going and checking that out in the archives. There is a concept in flight, and specifically as it relates to aerobatics of target fixation. It's the same thing if you mountain bike, for example, where if you look at the rock on the trail, you're going to hit the rock. I know that one of your sons has gotten into mountain biking. And one of the things that you start to learn when you get into mountain biking is look where you want to go, you know? And so that's something that I kind of continually have to remind myself. I would be lying to you, though, if I said I didn't feel stress that's intense at times about what does this path forward look like. Also, you just have to let go of what the path looks like. Going back to a monk has 3 robes and a bowl and they're just fine.
Yeah. So you've spoken or you've expressed just significant confidence. You can solve any problem. You can, resourcefulness is your greatest resource. I'm curious, had we had a similar conversation before the Better Labs, would you have responded with the same sentiments?
No, I don't think that I would have. And I think that this is part of what happens when you exercise your agency. And like I said, the saying leap in the net will appear, as much as I would love to tell you that that platitude is true, it's false. However, maybe another way to look at it is what is the net? The net might be, maybe it's not that you get to your seed funding round, which we were trying to do with the Better Lab, or pre-seed rather.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that you're connecting to something that you already contain. And this is something I've reflected on a lot as it relates to Zen Buddhism and just religion in general. I grew up as a Roman Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 14 years, I think. And now that I'm a member of a Zen Sangha in the Plum Village tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, who I think is an amazing person and very wise, just like Jesus and Muhammad are wise people who have a lot of great lessons. Whether it's religion or business, I personally think that every human contains all information, and everything that we experience in life, or everything that we might learn from other people. For example, if you're listening to this podcast or have listened to past episodes, and if something my guests have shared has been interesting to you, if it's inspired you, if it's helped you to change your behavior, I truly believe that's because you already contain the answer and you're just able to access it because of something that's happening cognitively when you hear these things from other people, or when you meditate, or you listen to or read something in a Dharma talk, or from a teacher, or from your pastor or a priest. And I know that this might be controversial to some people. This is just my personal view. But I think what all of these experiences do, when you step into the crucible and you're on the forge and getting struck by the by the hammer as a piece of molten metal, I think if you become more attuned to how you think, feel, and act when that's happening, maybe that's the net. Maybe that's the thing that you're getting from the experience. And going back to how did I feel when I entered into this experience and was at the beginning of it, I felt dissociated. I was just cognizant. I lack conscious awareness. I'm with my children who are delightful and are the most amazing, positive things in the world to me. And I'm not here. Like I'm like, I don't know where I am. I'm in outer space. Mm-hmm. And as I went through the process of building the Better Lab and navigating financial insecurity and trying to find product market fit and trying to get to funding, and most importantly, trying to build a product to truly help people suffer less and get better sleep, did I have a lot of moments of doubt and insecurity, and at times not knowing what exactly to do, or feeling some lapses in confidence or uncertainty about how to navigate it? Yes, absolutely. And it was a transformative experience. And I really found that I had the capacity to do this all along. So that's the answer that I got.
Yeah.
That is really the most important thing. I
You're
take
the
away
net.
from this? Yeah, I'm the net. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just other people are dunking and the ball's going through the net.
Yeah.
I am the net.
Yeah. Yeah. Net with some big holes occasionally, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, the net. Yeah. Well, let's go back. So this kind of Axl Rose, Duff McKagan metaphor is kind of an interesting concept, because at the out, so you, like, if I'm remembering this correctly, like, total attribution for any idea is probably a silly thing to even go to, but like, you and I have been talking about sleep for a long time, right? And you have this idea, and it's, it turns into the Better Labs. And almost from the outset, it's my recollection, notwithstanding what you're saying about this, like, bassist versus lead singer concept, you felt you really needed other people, and not from a social angle, like, I just need partnership so that we can, lift together and whatever. It struck me, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was about credibility. It was about, knowledge gaps. It was about, the distinction in your mind between, like, creative competency and, like, hard business competency. And so I'm curious, like, how does that relate to this idea of you being the net and, like, everything being in you that you now realize you may not have then, but, like, how does that relate to what you're saying?
Yeah. So I'll start with the end of that, and then I'll go back to the beginning of that. So the end of that is, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to start a company, I'll quote my friend Mark Gainey here, who was an investor in the Better Lab and is one of the smartest people I've met in business and a great human being. And I think Mark got this from somewhere else, but, like, what is the role of someone starting and running a company? Raise capital, set strategy, cheerlead, like, be highly optimistic. Like, that's it. That's what one of the greatest lessons I've learned from him. And I've heard him say that the entire decade that I've known him. And at the outset of the Better Lab, you're absolutely right that my feeling was we would have the best chance of success if I had partners who had more of a, like, hard business background, and in particular greater experience around capital markets, fundraising, the deployment of capital, and the management of it.
Yeah.
And I did have a partner with those skills, a great friend of mine. And I also, going forward, have a different view of what I personally need to start my next company. And I now, having gone through that entire process, I think the most important things are the thing I mentioned a bit earlier in the conversation, which is unwavering belief in your ability to solve a problem. And then it's like your ability to set a strategy and capitalize the company. And I guess, like, unwavering belief, I think, really is the cheerleading or optimism. Yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly for me, I think part of what I learned during the fundraising process was, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs discover this, it's getting in the room, of course. Collectively, our networks as a team at the Better Lab got us a lot of fantastic opportunities. And also, once you're in that room, you have to have the goods, right? And I felt we had the goods. And also, you have to be great at telling a story. And my personal belief, and there are a lot of divergent views on this, I really truly believe, even if you're on Zoom, and especially if you're sitting down face to face, but I think it almost is even more important via video, where most of these pitch meetings happen. People have to feel your confidence, and they have to get excited about your idea. And I really, when I think about my professional background in communication and storytelling, as a journalist, as a podcaster, as a former communications executive, I know I can do that. And I'm now once I started getting in those rooms and pitching, which I had some anxiety around before we started doing it, once we started doing it, I felt like I love this. Like I love doing this. And, my next companies for now, I'm planning on bootstrapping. I'm currently not planning on raising capital. That experience, though, transformed my view of my ability to do that.
It's interesting. You say they have to get excited about the story. I wonder, is it not also that they have to get excited about you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And I know you're a component of the story, but like really on some level, I think about, there were a couple of relationships that came out of my time as a very, very young investment banker that were formative for me, maybe transformative. And one was this guy, Dick Kippard, who unfortunately has passed away. Dick was he was, by investment banker standards, he was sort of shockingly entrepreneurial. And later in his career, he became a very successful Chicago-based venture investor. And I remember one time, kind of just after Kellogg, I'd been reconnected with him, and he and his son-in-law were looking at a deal, and it was in a space that I knew something about. And so another guy, a mentor of mine from that bank, put us all together, and we were on the phone, and Dick said something. It was like the most basic thing ever. And he's like, look, on some level, I don't really give a, rip about the idea. I just care who is this person and who's the team they're going to build. Cause the idea is probably not the idea. Is this the person? do I want that person? I want to, that's what I'm investing in. And so I guess I'm curious, to ask a very pointed question. If you had to do it over again, knowing what you know now, what do you think about, or what would you advise yourself? Or it sounds like a kind of a hackneyed, coachy question to ask, but is there something you would have done different?
I think I have the answer because I am doing it over again.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, the answer is that I'm doing it on my own, and I'm bootstrapping it. And there are, of course, certain capacities I do not have. I am not a software engineer. I'm not a UX, UI person. It's kind of a multi-part answer. One of the learnings for me, some people felt that the Better Lab was just too simple as a product. And what people want when it comes to health and wellness is they actually want more data. They want more dashboards. They want more hardware. They want more sensors. And I believe that's certainly true. I think that this is one direction that technology is moving, is what I would call data and sensor maximalism. And this is certainly one direction that health, wellness, and longevity are moving. It's been interesting for me, though, having now spent nearly 30 years talking to the world's highest performers in sport, in performing arts, in business, having helped build a unicorn, having been on this path myself as an entrepreneur, having told the stories of and sat down with people for these types of conversations. If you look at what's happening on the cutting edge of high performance now, it is people becoming more attuned to the most precise, accurate, best sensor ever made, which is the human body and mind, and becoming more attuned to what's happening within ourselves. And in fact, completely shutting off so that we can recharge. And we are in this nearly post-human era. It's interesting. Go with me on this tangent, please, Shannon. We were touring a school this morning, and we were talking to the person who runs the school. And this school that we're thinking about sending one of our children to, the kids spend a lot of time outside, spend a lot of time doing tactile and kinetic things. They spend a lot of time as a group solving problems. Like, they showed us a diorama that the kids built in response to a certain challenge. So there's a big relational health aspect of what these kids are doing, which is almost completely disappearing now in the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm.
They are having an uncurated experience that they're thrown into where they just have to solve a problem as a group. And they're doing it without technology. And they also are spending a lot of time working with their hands, moving their bodies. And what the person who runs the school told us, I guess there are a lot of TED Talks and so forth about this that I'm not cognizant of, but I'm now going to check out, that there's been this radical shift for children's vestibular awareness, their proprioception, their gross and fine motor skills in the past decade, because they're simply not doing stuff with their bodies and hands. And yes, kids are getting put into the pipeline to become professional athletes by the time they're 11 and go to the Olympics and whatever, but they're really missing out on unstructured play. Or is this person at this school pointed out, when we were kids, Shannon, I'm going to make a leap here. I know we both grew up in the Midwest. If I wanted to play with a kid, I would go ring the doorbell at their house and say, hey, do you want to go ride bikes? My parents weren't setting up a play date for me, and that's fine. The world has changed. So on the one hand, technology is moving in this maximalist data, maximalist sensor direction as it relates to health and wellness. I truly believe that the future is not technologies that use you and turn you into a spectator. I feel the future is you using technology in the simplest, most essential, minimalist way possible that connects you to your body, mind, and other people so that you can suffer less and have greater conscious awareness. And I think that two of the biggest problems in the world right now are we no longer see ourselves as connected to other people, even people that we disagree with. Digital tools have made it possible that we no longer even have to sit down and have a conversation with someone if we have a disagreement. That almost never happens. People just tend to not have conversations with people not within the monoculture or silo that they exist within. And we often conflate doing more, adding more technology, abdicating responsibility for our consciousness, our body, our mind, and our relationships with other people to technology as a proxy for actually developing conscious awareness of what's happening in our body, disconnecting and relating to people. So that's what I'm interested in doing. And that's been a big lesson for me from the Better Lab. Some people said, hey, I have a $5,000 mattress. It doesn't actually make me sleep better, but I also have this ring and it tells me I slept really poorly. And did you know if you have a drink of alcohol, it's bad? And now I just watch this ring every time I drink alcohol. That's cool. That's for some people. But to me, the lesson is, hey, like there are much simpler paths and you can build this technology that is useful to people, not that uses them.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, I was a Better Lab user. If you were to look at my LinkedIn profile or something like that, you'd see multiple posts extolling the virtues of my experience, of the Better Lab app and the benefits that I experienced from it. I agree with you that there's a very intense quantification of life trend. But I think that like if I step back from what I am personally interested in, you and I ended up at TRX together for a reason. We share certain dorky predilections around understanding, movement and training and fatigue and adaptation and whatever. But most people, I think, just want to feel better. Or they want to have a better experience in their life. They want to wake up and not feel like shit. They want to like wake up and have energy. They want to not wake up 6 times a night. They want to, as it relates to sleep, so if I'll get on my Better Lab soapbox for a minute, the shame for the world of it ceasing to exist for the moment, I'm not giving up on it perpetually forever, but it's not available to the world now, is that what you were doing was not about sleep strictly. My view of what you were doing was designing unintrusive ways to help people achieve the behavior modifications often they don't even know they need in order to feel better in ways that they desire. Sleep was the first way you were doing that, but I could think of 50 other behavioral modification types that could help someone live a better life, suffer less, be more present, avoid chronic disease states or whatever. So I understand this. I understand the objection that you're raising, and I can absolutely like put myself in a pitch with a VC and hear it coming at you, and like totally get it. But to me, the power. I mean, the power of what the Better Lab did for me, right? Like, I answer some basic questions, and it makes a couple suggestions. Like, hey, you might want to think about this or this or this as things you could change that would help you. And it's like the dumbest thing, but having the Better Lab remind me daily, hey, bro, it's 1:00. You have this tendency to walk by I work at this co-working space, and there's a coffee, machine right over there that I can hit a button whenever I want. And I'm inclined to. It was like, hey, bro. It didn't actually call me bro. I kind of wish it did, but I think that was the next version you never got to. It's 1:30. You shouldn't have that coffee past 2. So if you're going to have a coffee, do it now. And, remember, don't do it after 2. And I did, it helped me. I didn't, and even when, I didn't have it reminding me on the weekends, but I was so habituated after I don't know, a month, 3 weeks, a month, something like that, to this reminder that I would drive by this coffee shop that makes the best cappuccinos and be like, cappuccino. Nope, 3:00. Fuck. All right, no cappuccino. And I would literally so I have an Apple Watch that I've stopped wearing other than when I use it to quantify my workout for the Future app, which is, how it's another podcast entirely. But while I was wearing it, I could validate that my sleep was improving. And more importantly, probably my perception of my sleep and my feeling of restedness and presence and energy was improving. Right. So, anyway, I just think about that. What you were unlocking was this gentle technology aided, self-directed method to change behavior to engender some other outcome. And the irony is I don't think, I've got an Oura ring. I've had over the course of the last 10 years, I've had every device you could have. And the data for me, and I think I'm more data dorky than most, it has no efficacy. I know it does for some people, but I would fair to say what you were solving was a problem for most people. Who are either not going to buy the Aura, or even if they did have the Aura or the Apple Watch or the Whoop or whatever, they may find that data actually anxiety inducing more than they do efficacious. Anyway, I'm off my soapbox. We can cut that out. I think so I'm interested. If someone were coming to you now, so you're doing these 2 new lines of business, you're doing them on your own. There's a whole different podcast to be had about what that feels like and is on your own the right way, right? I have strong feelings about that. I've done a lot of things in my career on my own, and that was soul crushing. A lot of that soul crushing having to do with isolation. But we'll put a pin in that.
That'd be a good future episode. I think that you're onto something there.
Yeah, maybe. The lights just turned adjusted in here. I don't know what happened there, but we'll roll with it.
It's time for a waffle party.
Yeah, sounds like it. But when you have this, you've got 10 jobs and always had, right? And one of them is advising early stage founders. And what do you say to them when they're coming to you? And I have to imagine you've seen them wrestling with the same thing. And is what you say to them now different than what you would have said to them when you were at Strava and you were doing advising?
Yeah, I've lived it. I've been through, I believe, most of the types of problems that they'll encounter. So in the general categories, I've lived all of it, whether it's fundraising, product, MVP, testing, data versus qualitative feedback, team stuff. Yeah, it's all very different. I think the experience of starting up, running a company, raising capital, working with customers, doing research. I was thinking about this today. I think maybe I saw someone's profile somewhere and it was whatever, Lance Romance, Enneagram type 6, blah blah blah. And if you're in a corporate environment, you've been through this. I have a lot of feelings of, I was thinking about this. Is that very inclusive to like actually stereotype someone and then share that with all of their peers and tell them they're very specifically this kind of human? I think the answer is it's probably not, and it's kind of weird. It may be useful for the person to have some level of understanding. Setting that aside, I think what you find when you start a company is if you have a super narrow view of who you are, if you have a fixed mindset, if you think there's only one highly particular way to do things, if you think you can go into the Y Combinator catalog of videos and go to first round and you're going to have the blueprint and you're going to get out the evidence every time it's time to make a decision and litigate it and use these tools, I'm not sure you're actually cut out for this, because the right answer is what works.
Yeah.
And what works is, the winning strategy is the one that works.
Yeah.
And you have to find that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we end up digging into, and it can be both quite fruitful and a little gnarly when we're doing it. In one of the entrepreneurship classes I teach at CU, is this idea of like, lights are flashing again. This idea of like, who are you? How do you show up in different circumstances, particularly under stress? And like, how do you develop awareness of that? Because the real power available to a founder is with self-awareness. You can actually, if we want to be like almost like touching on Machiavellian here, you can architect the circumstances for your success. Like defining your own role, building a team around you that complements you, building a team around you that pushes you in ways that you're not inclined to push, whatever. But all of those choices available to you require a significant degree of self-awareness, like a willingness to confront the reality of who you are and how you show up and your own biases and these things that you can't just like write shit down on a legal pad and like, okay, this is how, it takes like the self, dissection. It takes like work. It takes therapy. It takes working with a coach. It takes talking to people candidly. It takes like you being willing to acknowledge stuff you're not so psyched about or proud of or good at or whatever, which, there's this archetypal founder thing, like they're great at everything, never acknowledge failure and all this stuff. And you're like, that's so fucked because everybody around you knows what you're not good at. You may as well acknowledge it. Anyway. So the interesting, like the crescendo of this whole experience, hopefully for the students when we talk about this, is like, there's no one archetypal successful person. The question is, what conditions must be present for you to be successful and for you to create a context of success for the collective that you're building and for the project you're working on. And it's much more idiosyncratic based on whoever is that cheerleader and that vision setter and or strategy setter and that capital raiser. And it's actually, I think, the ultimate misstep to follow this very prescriptive path, given the reality that every founder is unique. And every founder's way of showing up in a moment and with a team and with an investor is unique to her or him in that circumstance. So if you think that you can just like, read venture deals and show up and like raise money, you're nuts, or if you think you could just like hire an engineer and like shit just magically happens, like you're nuts. You have to do this and not drive yourself crazy and not drive everyone around you crazy. You have to be, I think, willing to invest in the work up front, or accept the lessons that you've gleaned through the tuition you've paid, through the hardships you've experienced up to this point, uh, to really know who you are and how that influences what's going on around you. Anyway, which is why I think it's been, as your friend and, occasional collaborator and sometimes product guinea pig, fun to, while the individual circumstances are not always fun, it's fun to watch you learn about yourself and strip away some of the stories or the persona or the interpretations or the self-imposed restrictions or whatever, because you've actually, like, as you've gone through this hard thing and many hard things, you've seen them as fodder for, or opportunity for you to discover more about yourself. And that it's an opportunity arguably available to all of us in all things we do. Because if we're really, like stepping back from the, cliched, curated social media version of our existences, and we talk about what's really going on and we own up to what's really going on, like these opportunities to really look within are everywhere. They're constant. We just often choose to ignore them, because it's like, it's kind of uncomfortable, or I don't have time for that, or like I got something else to do, or anyway, I digress.
I believe that people can only be who they are. If you expect people to be anything other than who they are, what they are, then you're setting yourself up for disappointment. That's, I think, actually going back to all suffering arises from craving and from aversion as it relates to people. I think that's axiomatic. I also believe, to your point, the more we can cultivate self-awareness, I think the more compassionate we can be and the more effective we can be. I actually personally believe that compassion and self-awareness are some of the most fundamental skills of leadership and being a successful company builder, professional athlete, whatever the case may be. And I think what poor leaders do is they create drama triangles, and they actually engineer situations where, I'm sure you're familiar with the drama triangle, the Cartman drama triangle. For people who are listening, it's the idea that in every interpersonal interaction or professional interaction with more than two people, you're always going to have a hero, a villain, and a victim. And I think leaders who might have a fixed mindset, and some of these people are incredibly successful. They might be centimillionaires, they might be billionaires. However, some people, probably to relive or try to fix some trauma or broken narrative from their childhood, they have to put themselves in one position in that triangle, and then they engineer these situations. For example, someone might engineer a situation where it's, I'm always going to get to be the hero, and then it's going to be like a gladiator fight between the villain and the victim, and then I get to step in and save the day and wear my cape. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work. So when I think about what do great leaders do, they truly have a growth mindset. And by growth mindset, I think it's not that I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, I can do this. I'm an 8, a dominant controller, and like, this is what I do, and these are my wings. You're actually everything on that Enneagram whenever you have the need to be. That's who you are. In any moment, you can be anything to be effective. And you meet people in a compassionate and self-aware way. And I think what people see in popular culture about entrepreneurship, particularly within tech, it's, move fast and break things. I'm Mark Zuckerberg showing up in sweatpants an hour late at Sequoia and telling them to F off, write the check. And I'm going to have pit bulls fighting every day to make decisions. And whatever. There are a lot of companies who've had really outsized results and have built trillion-dollar companies with that kind of approach. And I don't actually think it has to be that way. I think that there's a different way to approach leadership and to get the same results. You might also say, well, Andrew, your startup just wiped out. What do you know? And I would say, I think I know something.
Well, sometimes you know because you saw what didn't work, and it informs what you believe did work.
Yeah.
And that's certainly, I mean, to continue riffing on what you've said, I absolutely agree. You can, as a leader, you can choose to show up in any of those archetypes in whatever way you believe will likely result in greatest effectiveness. The caveat I'd offer, the addendum I'd offer to that, and it's also sort of an addendum to the Mark Gainey quote about like cheerleading and what does that mean. I think the true mantle of leadership is assumed by the person who ceases to define leadership in terms of their own experience and instead sees leadership as service to others or to a cause, and ideally both. And so like the people that like are inspiring, are motivating, are like transcendent leaders are the ones who view their role like it's not about them, it's about everybody around them. And that choice about how they show up in any given moment is a function of the calculus of that choice is, how do I need to show up in this moment to help Shannon figure out what he needs to figure out? Or how do I need to show up in this moment to help this massive, to use a dorky, like Jim Collins inspired MBA like term, like we're going after this moonshot BHAG, whatever. How do I need to show up to help all these people believe that is possible, understand that their individual contribution to that possibility is essential, figure out what they need to get there and like get them there, all that stuff. So like the most effective leader, I mean, I think we hear a lot about the kind of the mythical imperious like mega leader guy, and it's all about the cult of personality of that person. But the experience most people have when they describe the leaders with whom they would most want to associate themselves, or the people they'd want to work with again, or the person I'd run through a brick wall for that person, or whatever. It's that person who's driven by mission and driven by contribution and service to those around them, and who doesn't personally identify, like the what or the why is not personally identifying.
Right.
And like that's the cheerleading. That's the thing that when you're bringing new people on the team, it's not transactional. It's personal. It's like it's commitment. It's like we are signing up to do this thing together. My job is I'm here for you. Like we're going to do this together. And that, yeah, I mean, look, I'm not an idiot. I know that like particularly in like venture-backed culture, that's not a way that people talk or think. But I do believe, like one of my personal, having been on the capital side of the equation and having been on the entrepreneur side of the equation, and now sitting in this weird like nether region between the two, what I believe is that there's like a bottom up cultural reformation that can happen in leadership, driven by leaders who are creating cultures. And then there's what I would call, for lack of a better way of expressing it, a top-down cultural reformation that comes to the realization that capital drives culture. And if a CEO is being held accountable only for financial metrics or only accountable for financial outcomes, even if that CEO is a total business hippie like me or like you, they're going to be forced to focus on these things. But if, on the other hand, the capital sees the economic virtue in human-focused leadership, and holds CEOs accountable, and maybe put a different way, because even then, that's like this weird hierarchical way of viewing it, rather sees their role as likewise creating conditions of success for the CEO and the people at that company with the CEO, you can have this more humanistic way of creating value and making the world better that makes the experience of the lives of the people in it better. And I think we'll end up having these cascading benefits But I might be the only person who's ever worked for a family office who thinks that way.
Yeah, I mean, really, really, Shannon, this is a core tenet of my new business, One Real Voice. You can find me at onerealvoice.com. If you're interested in working with me, you're a senior leader, a professional athlete, a politician, and you know that when the mic is hot, you want to be at your best and you want to keep growing as a long form communicator and conversation. It's called One Real Voice because at the end of the day, the only thing that each of us has to offer that is unique is the algorithm that is us and what it can put out. And when I think about leadership, when I think about startup culture, when I think about company building, I do think that a lot of our notions of how you're supposed to do it and what you should do are predicated on extreme outliers that have the most massive success. And some of those things are because they're truly exceptional, they're truly world class. And some of it also is right place, right time, right people. You can't separate these things. I think that what we can say for sure, though, is I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. You're not Alex Karp. And if you're listening to this, you also are not those people. And it would be a mistake to think that you're going to lead your company the way Alex Karp is leading Palantir. I think you need to connect to what do you uniquely have to offer, and you need to meet the moment when it's happening and solve problems, create solutions, and serve your customers. And like that's how you can move towards success. And like the practical aspects of that and how it's done are obviously much more complex than the very reductive way I just described that. But I don't know, like Alex Karp is really on my mind because he's doing his junket right now for his book. And whatever you think of Alex Karp, I think the way that he's showing up and doing media right now is extremely effective if you're Alex Karp. If you're anyone else, I would not recommend showing up for a conversation with Andrew Ross Sorkin, letting him say 3 words and then talking for 10 minutes straight and like being super tangential and looking quite spun out. I don't think that's going to work for the average person, but for Alex Karp, it works great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited about the opportunity that One Real Voice affords the people who are smart enough to engage you with it, because what I've learned, having been on a couple of different podcasts and listened, I'm a serial listener to them, is that the long form method is a problem for people if they're not willing to show up and be real. Like the talking points break down, when your soliloquy goes longer than like 3 sentences. And I mean, even when it doesn't, it's obvious when someone has rehearsed and they're basically speaking to some talking sheet. But the upside of the medium is it offers a chance for someone to really reveal their truth, who they are, what's unique about them. And there's risk in that, and it's not that you just want to show up and start weeping and disclose all your deep, dark secrets. For people, like I spend a lot of time working with, I'm not preparing people for podcasts, but I am helping people wrap their head around the difference between what has made them successful in one context and what will likely help them be successful in another. And usually that new context involves an escalating degree of responsibility, leadership. It might have a CEO title associated with it or whatever. And sometimes that like it's a 0 to 60 situation. Like you were not the CEO, you now are the CEO. Oh shit, what do we do? And one of the things that we end up talking about, along with the self-awareness concepts that we've already discussed, is how do you reveal who you are, what matters to you, and why you are in this world to the people around you? And what are the consequences of not, and what are the benefits of doing it? And the consequences, particularly in what I've seen in these situations where you go from like zero to CEO fast, the consequences are grave. Because, and I would say podcasting is somewhat similar, right? You may have zero awareness of somebody, and then you're listening to them, and there's, you're going to form an opinion about them fairly immediately based on what they hear. um, and so you can show up as who you are and take the risk of doing that and be thoughtful about how you're going to do it, or you cannot. The benefit of showing up in a thoughtful, prepared way that's real is the opportunity for someone to viscerally connect with you and who you are, and to have a light years better just a massive jump in connection, understanding, attraction, whatever term you want to use. The consequence of not showing up right is like immediate judgment. Fuck that guy, or fuck that person, or this person is an automaton. They have some kind of agenda, and that's it. And it's so what I think is interesting about what you're embarking on, you're already doing it, have been, is it parallels this kind of developmental work that I see in other leadership contexts. Maybe for you, it's more thought leadership. And for me, in this other context, it's more like discrete business leadership, but there's a lot of overlap between the two. And it's this idea of like, hey, I got to show up as a real human being. And I have ways to do that can make the experience for everyone around me better. And it can help everyone understand me better and more quickly and know who I am and connect to me. So I see such great need for that. Particularly like the world I spend a lot of time. This is a point I was thinking about making 5 minutes ago before I started on my first derivative soliloquy, which is I spend a lot of time interacting with people who have MBAs from, highly reputable schools, and they are conditioned to think. It's almost like living inside a game theoristic experience, right? Like they make personal decisions based on highly quantitative, utility focused, like completely inhuman ways. It's like the decision-making equivalent of using the Oura ring to figure out, did I get a 96 sleep score last night or a 95? And was it because I, took ashwagandha 2 days ago and it's still in my, why did that happen? And, they want to think about how they show up in these very human, very scary, both for them if they're willing to admit it, and absolutely for all the people around them who don't really know them, leadership contexts. And they want to be like hyper strategic about how they do that. This is the point to get across. I'm going to say this. I'm not going to say that. If they ask me this, it's literally like they decision tree these things out. And unfortunately, that feels comfortable to them because it's like a way of thinking, and it's a way of self-protection. Like, I know I won't go to the place that I don't want to go, and I'm going to share, I know these people and I know what they value. So if I give them what they value, blah, blah, blah. And the answer, like each of them as individuals, it's, to your point, too reductive to presume. So the best you can do is show up as the real version of yourself and give them something to hold on to. And so like, so many people out there who are successful have been successful by almost brute force, removing emotion, removing vulnerability, removing disclosure, removing, the personal, and advancing the persona. So my view of what you're going to be doing, what you are doing, right now, is helping people understand how to safely be more present, be more real, be more themselves, reveal the reality of who they are, and thus reap all those relational benefits. But I also see you helping them avoid the massive downside of it's like, oh, that's cool, I'm going to be on a podcast. Well, that could be just a total landmine you're stepping on if you show up and you like rip through your, I've got, my comms guy gave me whatever. That'll take you 3 minutes to rip through. Then what? Andrew, by the time I got to the taco line, the taco dispensary, I already ripped through the talking points. You were asking me about growing up in Michigan. I'm like, how the fuck did we get on that? Anyway, I digress.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, it's interesting because I think so much of what we're talking about is actually about deep listening. And for me, joining a Sangha and sitting with a group every week, it's funny because my wife knows that that's kind of like one of the primary activities that I do outside of the house, I guess, socially every week. And she's like, well, you got your Sangha, like you're going and talking to people. It's like, well, we're primarily, we're doing 2 sitting meditations, a walking meditation, reading, maybe a few readings from Thich Nhat Hanh, and then Dharma sharing. Dharma sharing is when people share about what's going on with their practice or things in their life that are positive or challenging. And there are rules for Dharma sharing. You always take 3 breaths before sharing anything. You don't interrupt each other. You don't respond to anything anyone has said. It's set in the cone of silence. There's confidentiality. And if you want to talk to someone about something they shared afterwards, you ask first. And if they say no, then they don't want to talk about it, and you don't talk about it. For me, there's something really revelatory about that because, again, I think part of the general leadership paradigm and like kind of like this brute force method or what's seen as successful, there are all these social engineering tricks that you can do as a leader. And if you're a leader, I'm assuming by now you've read Radical Candor, you listen to Brene Brown, you've read the Christopher Voss book about FBI hostage negotiation, you know the 8 tactical empathy techniques. And I guess I'm a bit different because I'm a communications professional, journalist, podcaster, professional storyteller. And anytime I come across any of those things in the course of interacting with a human or a business leader, I know when I'm being manipulated, and it actually enrages me and seems hypersynthetic. And this is also generally what people are trained to do. And it's almost like a checkbox. I'm going to say the last 3 words Shannon said. I'm going to give him a 5-word summary of his last point. I'm going to ask him how it felt. There are all these magic tricks you can do, and they are highly effective. They're just how our brain is wired, and you can take advantage of these things. Actually listening to people, deeply listening to them without the intent of advancing your own social capital status, maneuvering on them, leveraging them, is quite different. And there's still a way to deeply listen and be a highly effective leader. And that also helps you become attuned to, well, like, who am I? How do I feel? And what can I uniquely contribute? And
yeah, I would argue that the only way to be a deeply effective leader is to listen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen deeply, but yeah, I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think the only way over time to attract the right people, to achieve the right mission, to help those right people develop into their best and highest selves, is to show up in a way. Like, I hear what you're saying. The radical can't. Everybody's read Kim Scott. Everybody's read that book. Everybody's read or seen Brene Brown talk about shame and all this stuff. The difference is, like, are these tools? Like, I think if you started from the position that it's like the fundamental premise of radical candor is not like hitting somebody between the eyes with hard truth. It's caring. It's like, I give a shit about you. I care about you. I care what happens to you. I care about your experience. I care about what happens in your life and what you want out of your life. I care so deeply that if what you want out of your life is incompatible with what we're doing together, I will help you get to something that is better, even if it's not in my personal self-interest to do so. And the concept of shame and like vulnerability in Brene Brown is also underpinned by this, like, maybe I'll be a bit poetic. It's the concept of love. Like, I trust that if I show you my truth, you will treat me with respect and care. And I will reciprocate by treating you with respect and care when you show me yours. And I will give you the courtesy to work with you as two sentient beings in this world, just trying to do the best they can to live the right life for themselves. I'll do you the courtesy of trying to be helpful, and where we're aligned and and for work, we're aligned, we'll work together. And where we're not, we'll figure it out. But that's the thing that the Chris Voss, Chris Voss, the mirroring and I've read that book. It's it's useful. And it works until it doesn't, right? So if every MBA in my class, we talked about Chris Voss and everyone's read that book. So none of that shit works anymore on them. Because they're I know when you're mirroring and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But my view of that, what is the purpose? It's having this conversation with my daughter last night, and it was a hard conversation because we're butting up against a restriction of, something that my wife and I have imposed, and her friends don't have the same restriction, and she doesn't like it. And we're trying to navigate this conversation, and I'm trying to do it in a way that helps me understand the intensity of what she's experiencing and honors that, right? Because I'm not soon to be 14 and I don't have these friends. And when I was 14, the world was different. So I don't really understand this. And I'm a man and she's, growing into a woman. So that's a fundamental distinction in things. And so I'm trying to understand these things, but I'm also trying to help her understand me. And why do I feel this way? And what does this feel like to me to be in this moment with you and the circumstances we're sharing, some of which I contributed to and some of which you contributed to? And, why do I not want you to just walk away from this conversation? Because I acknowledge it's not fun and it's uncomfortable for both of us. Life would be a lot easier if I would just let this go and either raise my voice so that you know that I'm authoritative or whatever, and you were bad, or I would just give in and take off the restriction and you could just do whatever the hell you want to do. But what I love about my daughter and what I love about the relationship that seems to be developing as she matures is she was willing to stand there with me and have this uncomfortable conversation, and I didn't want to fucking have it. And she didn't want to have it, but she didn't walk away from me. And she expressed, I told her what it felt like to be in this circumstance. And she told me what it felt like for her. And that radical candor is not, hey, it's not just the Sheryl Sandberg, you sound like an idiot when you say, oh, all the time. Radical candor is unlocked by the belief that she's saying that because she deeply cares about you, or Kim Scott at the time. She deeply cared. She couldn't let it go because she just cared so much about, and that's the thing that everybody misses. So the other thing everybody misses, I think, about the Brene Brown thing is you can't just show up and everybody's vulnerable, everybody everywhere, and feel you got to do work to get there, right? I've been working with my daughter and she's been working with me for years. For her whole life to establish this safety so that I can risk feeling like I'm being a dick, because I'm imposing I'm imposing a rule that nobody else is imposing on her friends. And she can risk pushing back. And frankly, she can risk a behavior that I don't like, but she knows I'm, we will have a conversation that's uncomfortable but necessary. And that to me, that's the things that the best leaders do. And I'm not I don't think I'm the best parent. I don't think I'm the best leader, but I just I'm becoming aware of these things. And the thing that's what they do is they recognize that the best situations, the best circumstances, the best relationships, the best leadership context, the best collective achievements they don't come from like titular authority. They don't come from, funding or whatever. They come from this like fundamental, foundational caring and concern and regard and respect and all this stuff. And like most of the fucked up things that I see in work today come from this like super transactional disconnection between the reality of most people's experience and the capital or the leadership that is really engineering that experience.
Yeah. And one thing I can tell you for certain, Shannon, I know a lot of C-level executives, senior leaders out there listen to this podcast. If you want to show someone you work with that you care for them, I'm thinking about one time I was having a conversation with a colleague who had a very significant degree of influence on my professional trajectory. They asked me, there was some elicitation. They were asking me a fairly personal question. I was sharing something that was important to me. And then in the middle of the conversation, they said, "Oh, I got a Slack notification." they just like started responding to someone on Slack for like a full minute. And then when they came back, just like changed the subject and started talking about something else. So in the moment, I thought it was so funny. And as I think about sensors, humans, disconnection, and at times this dystopian world that we live in as it relates to leadership and human beings and company building, I just like that pops into my brain sometimes, and I just laugh about it. I know that we've gone pretty long here. I know you have lives to change, and I have companies to build, as do you. I want to thank you for being here, and I think one of the deepest expressions of listening for anybody who's out there, you might want to take away from this conversation. If you really want to connect with your colleagues, try to show them what you learned in jiu-jitsu last night, and then let them take your back and choke you unconscious in the middle of the office. That's one way to really, really connect. You might want to check with your people team before you do that. And Shannon, thanks so much for being with me along the journey of life and the journey of building the Better Lab. I think there are a lot of potential conversations we might have here in the future about company building and where we have been, where we're going with the Better Lab, with your businesses, with what I'm building with One Real Voice. And I know a lot of people out there are following my Substack, alwaysthehardway.substack.com. If you're not, please subscribe. All those links at HardwayPod on Instagram and my link tree if you're just totally lost, or you can go in the show notes. And Shannon, if people would like to work with you, can you share a bit about in what capacity you do that and how they could locate you? Probably on LinkedIn, I would think, or is there some better way to reach you?
No, LinkedIn's probably the best way. I too have a Substack, as all cool people do. It's Transcendencio. It's all about leadership. There's some stuff on there about if you decide you want to not start businesses and instead you'd rather buy one, about that. But a lot of it is having to do with leadership and the emotional and intellectual aspects of that people tend to avoid talking about.
Sorry, Shannon, because it will show up in the transcript of the episode on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, can you just spell out your Substack address?
Yeah, it's so Transcendencio. So it's like transcendence with EO on the end, instead of just, so it's TRANCENDENCEO, and then Substack. So, I mean, I do a lot of things. I teach at CU, University of Colorado, in the Lead School of Business MBA program. I teach entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is a course that I created for the school, which is essentially, what's the difference between starting a company and buying one that already exists with employees and customers and cash flow, and how do you go about doing that if you want to? I also teach a course called Projects and Entrepreneurial Companies, which is for people who are entrepreneurship curious. but tend to come from the military or large company backgrounds and really have no familial or professional context for being in an early stage thing. And so I help them find a way into an early stage company, and they essentially like indenture themselves to the founder or CEO or some C-suite person, depending on how big the company is. They do a project, and in exchange, they get to have a very up close and personal view of what it's like to build a small company like the ones that you are building. But it ends up morphing into a broader discussion of what is that experience like, and what are the behaviors you're observing, which of those do you identify with, which of those do you not, and what conclusions, if any, can you draw about your own entrepreneurial aspirations given what you're observing in this context. I also serve on a couple of boards for companies that have been acquired by entrepreneurs, some that are kind of minority investor owned, and the entrepreneur owns the majority. Some that are majority investor owned, and the entrepreneur owns the minority. I work very closely with a couple of family offices, which basically a family office can mean 50 different things to 50 different people who mention it. For me, most often it's effectively a single block of capital that's directly invested on behalf of a family. Could be one generation or one person, could be multi-generational. I tend to specialize in leading investments into private equity acquisitions. And then the thing that I'm less known for, but is probably the most fun, is kind of this hybrid role I sometimes play in helping kind of ascending leaders, often CEOs, but not exclusively, make sense of who they are today and juxtaposing that to who they want to be and how they want to be at some point in the future, and helping them think through those different things. And then by extension, I help people build management teams with a lot of that kind of information in mind. So hearkening back to what we talked about before, if the CEO is the constant, how do we build a team around her that leads to the most effective, most pleasant, most productive, most well-being inducing structure possible? And then on the side, I'm a dad and a husband and a kids, sports coach, and occasionally podcast participant.
What would you say your best pitch is?
My best pitch? Right now, because I mostly pitch against 12-year-olds from the 12-year-old mound, which is like 20 feet closer, straight up heat, man. I bring it hard against the 12-year-olds. And I'm unhittable when I choose to be, but that's against 12-year-olds. If I were to face people my own age, it'd probably be a different story.
All right. Well, Shannon, thanks for being here today. And anyone listening, if you want to step to the plate, Shannon will be happy to brush you back. So check out his Substack, find him on LinkedIn. Thanks for being here. And if you're listening to this, let me know what you think of this episode. I know it's a little bit different than what I typically do, and I would like to bring you more of these. So stay tuned. We've got more awesome guests coming up soon. And for now, we've got this awesome conversation. So thanks for being here, Shannon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This is Andrew Vontz. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Thanks to Shannon for rocking with me from TRX to the End Up to One Real Voice and beyond. Find Shannon on LinkedIn at Shannon Jones and subscribe to his Substack, transcendenceo.substack.com. That's transcendenceo.substack.com. Find that link in the show notes. And thank you to my amazing wife, Molly, my kids, my family, my awesome co-founders, investors, and customers for helping make the Better Lab an incredible product while it lasted. And thank you for supporting me as I get rolling with my consumer tech startup that's in stealth mode and One Real Voice. If you're a senior executive, pro athlete, venture partner, or politician, you know being a great podcast guest or host is a mission critical skill that gives you edge in highly competitive marketplaces. I work one-on-one with a select group of elite clients to build you into a world-class communicator who thrives in long-form, high-stakes conversations. When you're ready to be great, you can reach me at hello@onerealvoice.com or DM me at HardwayPod. More episodes, more experiments, and more awesome guests coming soon. Subscribe to my Substack at alwaysthehardway.substack.com and follow me at HardwayPod on Instagram to see where this journey takes us next. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you take the leap and explore your next big thing, because you've got it inside you. I guarantee it. See you next time.